Welcome to Eat, Sleep, Wine, Repeat, a podcast for all you wine lovers who, if you're like me, just cannot get enough of the good stuff. I'm Yanina Doyle, your host, brand ambassador, wine educator, and sommelier. So stick with me as we dive deeper into this ever-evolving, wonderful world of wine. And wherever you are listening to this, cheers to you. Hello, wine friends. We are back here again. And this week, I have such a fun guest on the podcast who has watched Saturday Morning Kitchen on BBC One. Well, if you have, you'll be very familiar with Helen McGinn, recommending great affordable wine. And she's also the wine expert on ITV's This Morning. She's the author of the Knackered Mothers Wine Club. That's a book, but there's also her super successful wine blog of the same name. And so after a decade of buying wines from the supermarket, we are settling down to talk about her career and wine moments. I am very satisfied that English wine does come up. We'll have some wine and food pairing recommendations. You will also get a wine glass recommendation that will surprise you, but equally remind you that wine doesn't need to be this overly thought out, poncy, unachievable thing. And after last week's deep dive into sparkling wine, I wanted this episode to be a much more relaxing listen. And so with it being International Women's Day a few days ago, may you snuggle up on the couch with a supermarket wine and listen to the energy of a very inspiring woman in wine as she tells us her story and hopefully gives you a few tips along the way. Enjoy. So I always start with what is quite a boring question, but tends to get a good answer. So, was wine love at first sight for you?
It was pretty much love at first sight, but It was a slightly unusual route into it, which was that I don't come from like a wine family. Nobody in my family had ever worked in wine before. We just drank lots of it. And I remember there was always wine on the table. There was always wine on the table, you know. We're all naturally quite greedy, and lunches seem to go on for quite a long time.
That's my kind of family.
Yeah, exactly. It was that kind of family. So wine was always present, but it wasn't really until university that I properly got into it, because I joined a wine society. And I joined the wine society not because I was thinking I really want to learn more about wine, but genuinely it was because it was the cheapest way to have glasses of wine on a Thursday night once a month. It was a very popular society. I don't think they ever realised. Yeah, it was. It was about 600 people were members, but they used to have tastings once a month, and there would be normally about 100 people would go, and I would go with my friends, and we would sit there and try the wines and kind of nod and look interested. But I genuinely found that after a while I was sitting there thinking, this is such a brilliant subject. It's so interesting. The people who came to talk to us were always so passionate about what they were doing. As far as I could tell, they got to travel to amazing places. They got to work with lovely people, and they got to drink wine for a living during the day. And that was the bit that I was
true.
Like...
we're missing all the boring Excel documents, and we're missing all of the actual practical stuff. But we do drink wine during the day, don't we?
But it was the fact that it seemed to be a job that combined travel and people and a really lovely end product. That was the bit that made me think, right, I need to know more about this. And I guess that was my light bulb moment where I thought I want to go and work in wine.
Okay. And was there a wine, though, that put you on the path completely?
Well, probably pre-Wine Society. It was when I said that there was always wine on the table. I do remember back in I'm going to go for kind of late 80s. Early 90s, I think there was a bottle of, I do remember tasting Penfolds for the first time.
Oh, wow. Penfolds Grange? It couldn't have been
God,
a Grange.
No, literally, it was Penfolds from a supermarket. It was a bottle that my dad had bought that was on the table, and I remember tasting it. And this was before the Wine Society University thing, but I do remember tasting it and just thinking the flavours were so delicious, and I couldn't, it was then... Australian wine was coming over, but there wasn't that much of it. It was just kind of starting. And so I think I remember tasting it thinking, that is so delicious.
It must be perhaps something like the Coonaga Hill, because there's a lot of that around, and now it's about £10 a bottle, and that stuff is brilliant.
I think it would have been something exactly like that, something that at the time probably cost about £8 or £10 in the supermarket. So it was definitely quite smart at the time, but it was just the fact that I was drinking something where the flavours were so vibrant, so delicious, and it felt warm and juicy and gorgeous, and I loved it.
Oh, I love that. So that's a great starting point. Do you have a favourite wine memory now throughout literally all of those wine travels, wine glasses you've sipped, wine friends you've met? Is there a special wine memory?
I think my most special wine memory has to be the fact that after I had my first son, George, I've got 3 children, well, they're all teenagers now, but after I had my first son, George, we had been given a bottle of 1988 Krug when we got married in 2000. And when he was born in 2004, I'm going to say, let's hope that's right, then that was the first thing I had to drink after George was born. And I remember that being, and I'm talking moments, like I'd had the baby, like, right, I can have my wine now.
I like you. But I like your style.
But I do remember there is that connection still to this day. I mean, I know it's a cliche to say that champagne is, you have that for the special moments in your life, or something with bubbles in for the special moments of your life. But even if I see a bottle of Krug vintage, and I did see an empty bottle of 1988 not that long ago, it definitely takes me back to a time where I felt so happy, and it was the most delicious thing I'd ever drunk.
And Krug obviously is really up there in top champagnes anyway, so it really was not a bad choice to go.
No, it was a very nice bottle.
And then post-pregnancy hormones, I'm sure it was elevated even higher.
Well, I don't know. I think after that I slightly lowered my expectations. I realised I wasn't going to be sipping Krug 88 every time.
You're a mother. Children ruin that. The pocket money goes elsewhere, doesn't it? Oh dear. Now, talking of pocket money, I don't know, people can tend to get better value wines in the supermarket. So that brings me to the point that you did spend how many years as a supermarket wine buyer?
It was a decade, yeah. So I joined Tesco in 95, and I was there. Yeah, I was there for 10 years.
And what were the lessons that you learned? Whether the way people drink or how to buy?
Well, first of all, it was, honestly, I still look back and cannot believe my luck. I felt like Charlie Bucket with his golden ticket, because I had really wanted to get a job in wine, but I didn't really know how to go about it. Yeah. And it was because I was then halfway through doing a degree, I got onto the graduate scheme for Tesco. And so they train you for a year, you spend going around the business training to be a buyer. So you'd buy everything from, potatoes to shampoo and health and beauty for a while, all different areas of the business, just so that you learn the skills.
And how fun was buying potatoes?
I didn't last there very long, but I loved doing health and beauty. I think because it was to do with smell. Yeah. Again.
Well, of course.
It was. It was really interesting. It was fascinating. But I joined with, I'd written on my application, that I desperately wanted to work in wine. And so after a year, I went back and knocked on the door of the chap who ran the wine department at the time and said, I'm still here, actually. Can I have a job in your department now? And so I was very lucky that they put me through all of my training, and I travelled the world with that job. It was incredible, and it was a very exciting time to be buying wine for a supermarket anyway, because then it was just as it was becoming a real thing. Everyone was expanding their ranges. We were buying wines, bringing in wines from new countries, first own label from Mexico and Peru.
Mexico.
Oh my God, it was amazing. It really was amazing. But I think the lessons I learned, so ask questions always and listen. Because I think that is the one thing with wine is, I've been in the trade now for about 30 years. You are never, ever, ever going to know it all. And the day you stop asking questions is the day you might as well give up, because there is always more to learn. It's about listening to other people's take on wine. So you've got to ask the questions. You've got to listen. And I think the other thing I learned is just to keep tasting. Taste as many wines as you can because it's changing all the time. And you think you know a wine and a region and you've just got your head around it, and then you'll taste an example that's just it's a completely different take, and you need to understand why, you need to know why, and so I think that's really important, just to keep tasting.
So back then, when you were bringing in wines from Mexico and Peru, I'm really shocked. They obviously didn't last very long. Was this at a time when Chile and Argentina were also being brought across?
Funnily enough, Chile and Argentina were two of my main areas. So I did most of France and South America and New Zealand for a while. But South America was a great love of mine. I absolutely loved that. I used to do about 3 trips a year to Chile and Argentina, a week in each. And then when I was there on one of the trips, I'd heard that someone was making some nice wines in Mexico, so we flew out there to go and have a look. And actually I did, oh my God, I do remember we did make a Mexican Chardonnay and Cabernet. And again, this is about, 25 years ago or something. Mm-hmm. They were delicious. They were amazing, but nobody bought them. I mean, they sat in that warehouse.
I can imagine.
It was just too early. I don't think people were,
It's still too early.
Yeah.
Were they from Baja California?
No, they weren't actually. No, they weren't. I mean, I still think to this day now, it feels like it's still going to happen for those wines, because anybody who goes on holiday to Mexico always comes back raving about the wine.
Yes.
But you do wonder whether that's the thing. At the moment, they're keeping the best stuff and, drinking it over there. So you have to look a bit harder to find it here. But, that's the great thing about the world of wine. We're never going to run out of places to find new things.
Not at all. And I suppose the thing with supermarkets is, you do have places that need to be filled and price points that you need to achieve. And so it's like a supermarket tends not to take a risk. Well, you did then.
Well, maybe that's why they don't do it now, is because they know what dreadful overstocks you're left with if you let some lunatic buyer go off and make, hundreds of thousands of cases of wine that doesn't sell. But anyway.
So that's brilliant. So when were you bringing in Chilean and Argentinian wines? What year would this have been, roughly?
Well, I started in mid-90s, and it had been going for a while then. But it was certainly, I would say that, early 90s was the beginning, really, of the great journey for South American wines in particular. And you look at it now, and I just still think, Argentina in particular is producing some incredible wines at the moment, and they're really pushing the boundaries with what they're planting and where and how they're making them. And I think there is a lovely balance there of tradition and innovation, and I think that's what makes Argentina in particular so exciting.
Did you go to every wine region of Argentina?
Pretty much. Yeah, I did go up to the north. We had our car broke down on a 6-hour car journey when we were driving up to Cafe Arte. Yeah, I remember that was, we got quite sunburnt, but it was such an adventure. And you would often go to these regions not knowing what you would find, and sometimes you would be shown wines that they thought would appeal to you, and then you would ask to taste, or can we just taste what's in that tank over there, and that's where you would find your gem. So it was a very exciting time.
That is amazing. And so at what point, when you were tasting different wines from tank and obviously creating own labels from certain places, did you decide to write a wine blog? Did this happen at the same time?
So no, that happened. The wine blog started. So I left Tesco when I had George, my eldest, because obviously it was a big travelling job, and George came along, and I quickly realised that I didn't want to be away for 4 months of the year for a while. Yeah. So I changed job, and actually I did leave Tesco at that time because I realised there wasn't another job I wanted to do there. I could have gone part-time, I could have done a UK-based job, but I thought, actually, I've had 10 brilliant years. Yeah. I'm going to do something different.
And you didn't really want to buy potatoes, I guess.
Yeah, I didn't want to go back to that. No. I was truly, you know what wine's like. It's like Hotel California. Once you're in there, you never leave.
You can't leave.
And, so I actually changed jobs, and I was very lucky in that somebody who I used to buy a lot of wine from when I was a buyer, he was in the process of setting up a new agency, but it wasn't a typical agency. It was a very skinny team, and what we were trying to do was put producers and supermarkets closer together.
Okay.
My timing was extremely fortunate in that I was given a fantastic role there, which was super flexible around having a newborn. In fact, so flexible, I went on to have 2 more whilst I was there. And
why not?
Yeah, but it was great. I mean, I look back and realise it was very good for me, because I was still working in wine in the bit that I loved, which is I really love, I know it's not for everybody, but I love the supermarket end of wine, because I do think for a lot of people that is the start of their journey.
Yeah.
And if I can be there at the start of their journey, and, my whole reason for staying in it is I love communicating about wine, whether it's talking or writing about it. And so the blog happened because when I was doing that part-time role, by then I had 3 small kids and I was mostly working from home, and I was spending, the job by then had suddenly got quite spreadsheet focused. So in brackets read boring. And I found myself, like, in the evenings I would be working, and I thought, I've got to do something different, just otherwise my brain is going to implode. So this was a time, it was pre-Instagram, the social media explosion, but blogs were very fashionable then, and there were a lot of parenting blogs around. Oh, yeah. And I had basically got through the toddler years by every time one of the babies didn't sleep or didn't eat something, I would Google it, and you would always find a brilliant blog with somebody telling you what they did to kind of get through that particular bump in the road. And I remember having a thought and thinking, I don't go to textbooks for my parenting help. I go to the internet. So why don't I, instead of my friends all ringing me on a Friday afternoon, which is what they used to do in a panic from the wine aisle, why don't I just start a wine blog, and I'll put a couple of wines on there every week, and then I'll tell my friends and family to go and have a look at that, because it meant that one evening a week I would just have a couple of hours where I would write up a few wines that I'd tasted, share something anecdotally about, life with small kids, basically try and use humour to communicate about wine. But my thing was I didn't want to make it just wine focused, because for most people, wine is part of a conversation. It's not the only conversation. And so I guess that was my hope, was that I could, a bit like horrible histories. So my kids used to read horrible histories. So
I think I did too.
Well, you end up learning about history without even noticing, because you're reading a story and it's making you laugh. And I guess I basically thought, well, that's what I'll try and do with wine. I will write about it, but I'll try and make it funny. So by the end of your 5-minute reading my blog, you come out with 2 wines that you might want to go and try, but you've also hopefully learnt something else and something's made you laugh. That was the idea. So the Knackered Mothers Wine Club, as it was called, that's what I called it, because that was the title of an email that I used to send to friends of mine before it came into a blog. So the email started life as telling people what wines were coming up on promotion, because I used to know. Yeah, and then I just turned that into a blog, and that's how it started.
Oh, I love it. And so obviously you've done are you still doing the wine blog now?
So I still do the wine blog to this day, which again, I mean, blogs are so old fashioned now. Nobody really does them. Everyone's moved to Instagram or Substack or newsletters or whatever it is. But my blog to me is, I've never monetized the blog really. I don't do paid individual wine reviews on there. It is literally just stuff that I've tasted and I've liked. And I still do it, not as often as I used to. I mean, I used to do it once a week. I probably now do it once a month. But it's a really nice way of just keeping up with people. And especially, I mean, that's been going now since probably 14 years ago that I started the blog. Wow. So it's still a way for me to let people know if things are coming up, if I'm doing events or with the books as well. It's a lovely space. And I feel like it's my space that I've always wanted to keep going. Really.
Well, I suppose with all your communication and your education, I suppose that's evolved to what now you have a wine course.
Yes. So the wine course, if you go to Create Academy, and Create Academy are a wonderful, wonderful team of people who put together courses on everything from food to gardening to interiors to all sorts of beautiful lifestyle things. And they came to me last year, or the year before actually, and said, we're thinking of doing a wine course, would you be up for doing it? And I jumped at the chance, because I had watched some of their other ones. Anna Jones, one of their chefs, exactly, she did a brilliant one, and Thomasina Myers has done one as well. And so I jumped at it, and essentially they said, what are your thoughts about how to do this? And luckily, I had a book, my book, which came out of the blog, which again, that's 10 years old. It was 10 years old like 2 days ago, weirdly.
Oh, happy 10th anniversary.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so the Knackered Mother's Wine Guide was the book version of the blog, and I wrote that 10 years ago. And so because I've updated it over the years, I mean, it stayed in print from when it was first published. I'm very lucky that the publishers are huge supporters of it, and they update it every few years and it just keeps running. And so I sat down with the Creative Academy team and we looked at the book, and because I'd written the book, which is called the Knackered Mother's Wine Guide, Everything You Need to Know About Wine and Much, Much More. It genuinely is the only wine book I have ever written and will ever write, because I promised myself I would do this one book and wanted to hand on heart say to people, if you want to learn more about wine, like not everything, but like enough to get you going, start with this and then go off and buy all your other very detailed wine books or whatever you want to do. But this is a good starting point. And so that's really what the wine course did. The online wine course was bring to life the book.
Now, one of the things when I was flicking through was that you are giving people advice on how to buy wine in a supermarket. And I would imagine you're one of the best people to ask, seeing as you were buying wine for a supermarket. Now, are you allowed to give us a few tips on what someone should do in that aisle rather than calling you on a Friday afternoon?
Yeah, well, you could do that. Or, I mean, you can search up all the wines on the blog because there's a little search function. So you can type in your retailer and the colour you want, and it will bring up everything I've reviewed recently. But I would say genuinely that is the thing to do, is do your research before you get into the wine aisle, because think of it like you do clothes shopping. If you've ever gone clothes shopping and you're not really sure what you're looking for, that is when you come home with something. You never find anything, or you come home with something and you wear it once, you think, I'm never going to wear that again. Yeah. Or what was I thinking is the thing I normally do if I buy clothes without pre-planning. I remember I bought a caftan once, and in my head I was Talita Getty in Morocco, you know, kind of circa 76. And I remember I took this caftan on holiday, and afterwards I saw a photograph of me in it, and I looked like Princess Bloody Margaret. And I remember thinking that was the last time I ever think like it was a impulse buy, and it didn't work well for me. So I think the same goes for wine. You need to just do a bit of homework before. Like if you're buying wine to go with something particular that you're eating, have a think about what sort of thing might work. And then just have an idea before you get in there. If you see an offer that looks too good to be true,
probably is.
In my experience, it probably is. But having said that, if you do see a brand that you know and love, and this is particularly true of champagne, if you see a brand you know and love and it's on offer, just fill your boots, because you're buying something you know you love, and so you might as well take advantage of it. So yeah, do some research before you get there. That would be my top tip.
Yeah, no, I think that's also really a good idea. Brands. Once you've understood a brand, it's one of those things you can branch out, and very often supermarkets will have, if they have the red version, they'll have the white version, or sometimes even a few more as it becomes more popular. So that is a very, very good tip.
Thank you.
How was filming your first online wine course? Because you go around, you go into wineries and stuff like that. Was it rather comfortable kind of going on that journey?
Do you know, we filmed that over 5 days, and it was 5 glorious sunny days, and we were in a vineyard. We were down at Wistons in Sussex, and they've got a beautiful winery. And where we filmed in the vineyard, there's like a little hut at the bottom. I mean, it's much nicer than a hut. It's a gorgeous little like barn building type thing. And we were in there for a lot of it, and in the winery. And it was when Dermot was still there, Dermot Sugrue. So
he's just left.
He and I did a chat on camera, which was supposed to be 2 minutes, and I think it's 12 because I mean, there is one person that talks as much as I do. It's Dermot. So they literally couldn't shut us up.
I mean, he probably should represent English wine. The amount that his energy, his passion, his ability, to communicate.
But do you know what? To be fair as well, he does have a very, very good way of explaining things. You know, he is a technical winemaker, but what he understands, and I guess this is what I've spent the last 15 years trying to do, well, more than if you think about it when I was at Tesco, is there is no point in talking in a language that your listener doesn't understand, because they will stop listening. You have to think about how what you're saying is going to land with them, and therefore you need to use language that is going to mean something to them. And, you know, that is a real skill in itself. And I think as a winemaker to have it, it makes a big difference. And he definitely has it. But by the time we filmed the first one, I had actually been doing telly for about 10 years because I started doing the Alan Titchmarsh show, which was a daytime TV show. Yeah, back in, 2013 when the book came out. I got a phone call from a producer who said, you know, we're looking for a wine expert. Will you come and chat to us? So I remember going for this interview, 10 years ago. And I walked into a production company and I met with the producers and they were saying, you know, we just want a wine expert to sit there and pair wines with the chef's dishes and chat to the guests and stuff. And so I remember sitting at this interview thinking, this sounds amazing, like so much fun, I'd love to do it. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the interview, I was thinking, is anyone going to ask me if I've ever done telly before? So no one seems to realise that I've literally just walked in off the street and I've never been in a TV studio before. So at the end of the interview, I said, so, you know, do we do a screen test or something? I'm like, no, God, no, you'll be fine. No, we'll just go for it. And so genuinely, the first time I ever did television was live TV.
Wow, that is amazing.
And I've done pretty much everything I've done ever since has been live. So obviously, Alan Titchmarsh, that was about 3 years, and then I went from there to This Morning, which I still do now. Obviously, that's all live, and then obviously Saturday Kitchen, which is live.
There you go. What do you do now on Saturday Morning Kitchen? Do they send you a lot of samples in advance for you to try to then decide to pair what with the dishes that are going to come up on that? Is that the main focus for you?
It's really lucky. In all of the television work that I do, I have completely free range. So for Saturday Kitchen, for example, I will be sent the 2 dishes that the guest chefs are cooking. I'll then make them at home and I will usually call in 3 or 4 different wines to try. So I'll have an idea of what might work because you know when you've been doing this for a while, you look at the ingredients on the page and normally a couple of wines spring to mind, wine styles spring to mind. But I've found, you know, through experience that it doesn't always work that way. Sometimes it's the wild card that actually works really well. And sometimes you look at a recipe and you think, I don't even know where to start with that. So you do just have to try different styles. I get my leg pulled a lot because I do quite a bit of rosé. I don't know if you've noticed on the show, but rosé is such a forgiving food wine. That is the point. You know, when you've got quite tricky ingredients.
And it's great with savoury flavours, more umami
great with savoury
flavours,
exactly
spices.
Exactly that. So it is often the way.
It was only last week that you recommended Balfour's juice in the 8 Acres sparkling rosé for Valentine's Day.
Yes, I did. You're right. And I was thinking, because I've done that somewhere else as well, because I absolutely love that wine, the one from the Co-op, and it's something like £18.
It's such incredible value. You do know that I'm biased, but I do work for Balfour. I don't know if you know.
Oh, do you? I didn't know that. Oh, well, I'm so pleased, and I'm embarrassed because I was the English wine bar when I was at Tesco, and so many, many, many years ago, I remember, you know, back in the day, then it was just Nytimber, Balfour, Hush Heath, and Chapeltown, that's what I was thinking of. So I went many years ago, but I've not really been in recent years because having spent 10 years travelling the world, I now genuinely don't get out much. And so I haven't been to see them recently. And after I did that on the show, they got in touch and said, please, please, please come down. And I would love to, because I've spoken to Fergus extensively on the phone, because whenever I'm reviewing a wine or talking about a wine, if I haven't been to visit, I will always pick up the phone to the winemaker and say, right, I'm about to talk about your wine. Is there anything you want to tell me that helps me put it into context? Because I do think it's really important. Part of my job is to try and get across what the winemaker or the producers are trying to do with the wine. So I've had conversations with him and they just seem like such a great crew down there. And they're doing amazing things with all their, you know, it's not just sparkling now, it's all their still wines. I mean, you're making wines in every colour. It's brilliant. Really brilliant.
No, and I think Fergus as well, as a head winemaker, he really resembles, whereas you said Dermot Sugrue, who is an incredible voice. And he has, and actually interesting, he has a very specific style. Like he obviously was making Wistons for many years. Yeah. He is currently making the sparkling wines for Artilium, a small boutique producer. He's obviously gone to carry on now doing his personal project, the Sugrue wines. But if you taste all of them, they've all got a very specific style.
There's a Dermot DNA. Brutal.
Is it absolutely. You either love it or not hate it, but it's a very so like powerful, strong, high acids. But it's brilliant. But anyway, it's so interesting, and I love that when we now get to explain to people, you know, you're going to eventually, just like you might say, do you like Bollinger champagne? Do you like Krug champagne? And you choose a brand based on its style, or anything Dermot touches has a real specific style. And certainly from Balfour, Fergus, they go for this really pure fruited style, which is so excited that they're so different. But Fergus is this, he resembles the young winemakers of England.
Yeah, definitely.
And how that they are really open to communicate and share their styles and really investigate, and all the clonal research that's happening in England. It's exciting. So yes, come down to the Husheath Estate, 400 acres. You'll have a great time, especially if it's sunny.
I will. Well, he also said, as soon as you said there was a restaurant there, I was like, right, that's it, I'm in.
Food.
There's food and wine. I'm there. Yeah.
So, okay, let's go on to food and wine. You are trying to pair on Saturday Morning Kitchen. We've already said that rosé wine, whether it is still or sparkling, can be very, very forgiving with food. What have been some really fun favourite food and wine pairings for you? Or even some crazy ones that surprised you?
Well, funny enough, on rosé, so there was, I remember, I don't know if they've got it anymore, but Lidl had a Tavel rosé for a while.
Okay, yes,
and
stronger.
It was something crazy like $7.99, but it was really good value. You know, very typical, little bit earthy, quite full on and strong. And we paired that with, I think the chef was Tom Parker Bowles, and he did a smoked mackerel pate, but it was with treacle bread and beetroot pickle. And I remember when I saw pate, treacle and beetroot, I was like, okay, we need a wine with a bit of oomph. Yep. I wanted to get the earthiness in there as well because of the beetroot. And it was that combination, I remember, worked really well, because I remember when I put the bottle on the table, the initial reaction from most people was like, oh no, I'm not sure about that, because the colour is so dark, and we've got so used to people assuming that dark means sweet. And I'm like, no, I promise you, it's bone dry, it's got bags of flavour, let's just give it a try. And that one went down really well. But another favourite one I loved was the lovely, lovely Paul Ainsworth, the brilliant Padstow Cornish chef. Or do I mean Rock? He did the most ridiculous dish. Remember, it was during lockdown, so everyone had gone a bit bonkers. We were all a bit bonkers. And he did proper chips, like three times.
Triple cooked.
Triple cooked chips. It was covered in cheddar, so they were basically posh cheesy chips, but with black truffle all over the top. I mean, it was was the most ridiculous, most delicious thing. And I paired that with
rich and earthy. Yeah, what did you?
Yeah,
choose?
Rich and all of that. But what are you going to do with chips and cheese?
Something high acid.
I did a Chanoine Frère, their Reserve Privé Champagne, which Majestic still have vintage. It was 2014. It's had, I can't remember off the top of my head, but it's had quite a long time on lees, obviously. And it's normally about 25 quid a bottle, and it went down to about £18 a bottle, I think, on promotion. That's how I managed to get it on, because normally you'd never be able to put a wine, that's expensive on the show, and especially during lockdown. But it was such a fantastic champagne, and it was just perfect with all of those ingredients. And it felt, as I say, in the middle of the time when nobody could go out and everyone was going a bit mad, to have posh chips and champagne, where it just made the world seem a slightly better place.
Do you know, I totally agree with you. And it's funny, I've spoken to many wine professionals, and chips and champagne, or of course, if you're in England, English sparkling wine, is a real favourite. The acidity just cuts through, the saltiness of the chips. It's an amazing, simple pairing, but I like the fact that posh chips and champagne. Love it.
Yeah, lovely.
So, my question for you, because we've been mentioning a lot of sparkling wines, and quite clearly everybody listening, if in doubt, that's actually probably one of my tips. If you don't know what wine to pair with your food, or if you've got 3 courses and you're thinking, oh God, what can I do if I've got to do one wine? Sparkling, the high acidity, cut through.
Yeah, I'm sort of, I'm sort of with you, but I had this conversation with someone the other day, and I can't remember the context of it, but I was the champagne buyer for quite a long time as well when I was at Tesco. And I remember whenever you would go to the region, and if you were being wined and dined, which as the buyer of Tesco you were on quite a regular basis,
tough times.
Then you would be, you would have these amazing dinners, but you would have champagne through the whole dinner, and told that champagne could go with anything. I still struggle with that. Like, if I have I'm sorry, but if I've got meat on my plate, just doesn't work for me.
The only thing I would say, steak. I really would not want a sparkling wine with steak. But I would be very happy with a Blanc de Noir or something that could go with even some lamb and some duck. But I can't go to steak. But everything else, I think it's really good style in that regard. Yeah. Anyway.
As soon as, if I get to those sorts of flavours, I want something not with
juicy,
bubbles
fruity.
in my glass.
I agree. Talking of champagne and bubbles, what wine glass would you choose? What's your ideal wine glass for enhancing?
Okay, so I would, if I drink fizz, okay. I'm the worst wine expert in the world. So I would say your glasses, doesn't matter as long as it's clean and doesn't smell of anything else. For every day I use, don't hate me, I use stemless IKEA ones for every day. I love them. I love them. And I know that some people like I make their teeth itch when they see me holding a glass without a stem, mentioning no names, but I don't care. They don't get broken. They last forever. They're really cheap, and I've got boxes and boxes of them. But I do love a coupe for champagne. Often we open a bottle of sparkling. If we've got friends around for drinks on a Saturday evening, we'll have sparkling. I will always serve it in coupes, because to me I just love the decadence of it. I just do. It's really
and also
lovely.
If you're drinking it quickly, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter about
no, exactly. Yeah, but I have got some smart ones. I was very fortunate to be given a whole load. Funnily enough, I was at Black Chalk doing the Hampshire Fizz Festival in the summer. I was asked to go and open it. It was such a lovely event. They had about 8 wineries there: Pommery, Jenkin Place, Exton Park, all the lovely Hambledon, all the lovely ones. And it was at Black Chalk, and the man from Riedel was there. And as I was leaving, I think he was one of the people who had seen me on Instagram holding my stemless IKEA glass, and he literally forced this box of really lovely Riedel glasses on me. And I said to him at the time, please, they won't last 5 minutes in my house. Honestly, I can't. And he said, well, just keep them for smart. And I have. They're up in if I've got people around who I know are not going to break glasses, then they go on the table. But
if they're real adults,
if they're proper adults, then those
there's not many of us
from time to time. Yeah,
not many of us. But, well, Helen, I'm going to tell you something. So I'm a massive supporter of stemless, and in fact, so many people make comments on my Instagram because I very often am on there with my stemless. But I use a Riedel stemless glass, and for anybody listening, lovely. They are £10 a glass, and because they are stemless, you get everything that you would get from a top Riedel glass that's nice and thin-lipped. But yes, we haven't smashed one of them because simply they really are more sturdy, and most of the time when you if you're going to smash them when washing up, well, that's just that. But a lot of the time they get knocked down on the table, don't they? So for £10, Riedel do really good stemless glasses.
No, that is good. But I have to say the IKEA ones are £1 each.
Yeah, okay. But listen, Helen, this is why you speak to the masses, and they listen to you and they know, because that is what most people are drinking from as well. No, I appreciate that. There you go, everyone. This episode, everyone, is not sponsored by IKEA.
No, it really isn't.
Oh, dear me. So now, obviously, we've been talking about wine a lot because that's the main thing that you do, but you have actually written some fictional books, which I love that. Was that always the plan, or is it just that you've enjoyed writing and it's taken you there?
Yes, it's because, by the time my career seems to have gone like in 10-year chunks, if you like. So I did my 10 years at Tesco, and then I did 10 years on and off, really, where I was still working in wine, but in more of a marketing role. And during that time, that's when I started the Knackered Mothers Wine Club and the blog, and really, really loved the writing, and then wrote the book. But when that came out, my publisher came back and said, okay, what's next? And that's when I pointed out to them that I had written the book, the wine book that says everything you need to know. So I couldn't really do another one saying, oh yeah, here's all the stuff I forgot to tell you. So I thought, well, I still really want to write. And I had harboured a kind of secret desire, really. The only person who knew I was writing a novel was my husband. And I started doing it. Oh, my goodness me. It took me 4 years to write because I did it on and off, in between times, and didn't really tell anyone I was doing it until it was finished. And then when it was finished, I gave it to my agent. And again, it took me about a year to pluck up the courage to even say the words out loud. I've written a fiction book, so I was like, I'm really not sure about this. But I love reading. I love reading. And I grew up on Mary Wesley and Rosamund Pilcher, and I love a saga. I love a love story. I love books that just take you away for a little bit, but I also love books that are not too taxing, if you know what I mean. If I'm on holiday, I want a book I can race through that will transport me, that will make me laugh and maybe cry a little bit and just make me think, and fall in love with the characters, really.
Love it.
So I thought, I'm going to give it a go and show my agent the book. And actually, the last meeting I had before lockdown was with a publisher that my agent had gone to and shown them the manuscript. And the last meeting I had was, we got a 3-book deal off the back of that. So I've written 3 now, and I'm just writing number 4 because I've got another 2-book deal now. Yeah, so I'm on my way with number 4, but I obviously have to balance it with everything else that I do, and it's still very much, it's not my main job. I'm loving all the other things I'm doing at the moment, but it is absolutely my kind of plan B. The lovely thing about writing and talking about wine is it's great, but the telly, the nature of it means that it's changed. It's not going to be there forever, so I'm just going to really enjoy it whilst it's happening. But I love knowing that when it's somebody else's turn, I've got lots to get on with.
I love
like finishing the book.
Yeah, well. So the latest book, for anyone who's interested, so it's romantic and it's emotional. It's called This Is Us. Now, the main character, Stella, she's dealing with the disappearance of her husband. So my question to you: what wine would help her through that situation?
Oh my God.
It's very serious
Stella.
Now. Poor Stella. Yeah.
Stella.
What wine would be,
Yeah, she is married to a ship. Sorry, that's a bit of a spoiler, but you kind of know that from the back cover. But so I would say anything in the beginning takes her away. She does actually get taken, her book club friends take her to Florence on like a 3-day mini break just to give her a change of scene. And so again, like I said, I weaved in quite a few Italian wines in there and Negronis and things like that, and lots of Chianti.
I love it.
But they also end up going to Mull. The story takes them to Mull. And actually, the bit I really love writing about was I set myself a challenge to write about whiskey, because I love whiskey, but I've never really written about it. Most of my commissions are wine-based. And my lovely friend Dawn Davis, I'm sure you know her, she's a master of wine, she's amazing, but she has the most fantastic way of talking about whiskey using words that I can relate to. So whereas before, I think whiskey was, I did my diploma a million years ago and studied whiskey and all of that kind of stuff, but it's not something that I would choose to go and drink myself. Like, I'm not like, I really fancy a whiskey tonight. That just doesn't happen. But writing and setting it in Mull, I thought, actually, I need to practice what I preach. And I always say, if you are somewhere, drink whatever is made locally, because it helps you really understand the landscape and the people. It just sort of, if you can drink something that's kind of reflects the surroundings. So I wrote about, a very peaty whiskey in the story, and that's what she drinks, and she loves it. And she's not a whiskey drinker, but she falls in love with whiskey.
Is her drink of choice. I love that. Brilliant. And good for you. And just for fun though, okay, because we're talking books here, what wines do you think would match with the very strong personalities of these 2 leading women in literature? Okay. So Lizzie Bennet, Pride and Prejudice. What wine would suit her?
So Lizzie Bennet, to be honest, I think she'd love a cocktail. I mean, she's quite, she's really fun. She sort of does stuff that is not expected of her. So I can see her knocking up a French 75, actually. Okay. Possibly with English sparkling wine instead.
I like your style.
That's what she'll do.
Love that. Now, what about Lisbeth Salander, the girl with the dragon tattoo?
Oh, she looks like an orange wine drinker to me.
Edgy, like it. What a perfect choice. Oh,
very cool. Yeah, very cool. And kind of tough enough to drink it and make it look like it's water, you know.
Fabulous choice. So, next week I am back with Helen for part 2, and we are going to the southwest of France. So, we are back on the education front and learning all about Cahors, their Malbec, which is known as Cotte in that region, and the Tannet grape from Madaran. We'll talk about regions like Gaillac, Jurançon, Bergerac, and grapes such as Petit Manseng and Gros Manseng, and spoiler alert, these can be great value. Now, finishing off the episode with our weekly wine quote, I have a Spanish proverb or saying for you, and it goes, "Good wine ruins the purse, bad wine ruins the stomach." Now, although the bad wine part is 100% accurate, after listening to Helen and knowing what we have coming up next week as well, I hope actually those of you with the love of wine will feel happier choosing your wines in the supermarket shelves, knowing there's some exceptional value out there. That's it for this week. Please, of course, share this podcast with all your wine friends. Leave a comment on Apple and a rating on Spotify just to help me get this podcast out to more people. I'll be super grateful. Wishing you an enchanting week of wine discoveries and possibilities. And until next week, cheers to you.